They were merely 1 month old, two small golden retriever pups, trembling, quiet, and bound to a tree amid a furious blizzard. No cover, no refuge, only a note fluttering in the breeze. We regret this. Please show kindness. They were abandoned to perish, discarded like yesterday's refuse, and nobody arrived. Nobody, until Sarah Bennett appeared, a mourning widow traveling to nowhere, who discovered more than just two forsaken puppies. She uncovered hope exactly where the world had abandoned it. What followed next? It will warm your soul like sunlight after a prolonged, harsh winter. Before we start, tell me, where are you viewing this from? Share your country in the comments. And if you believe love can still be found in the iciest places, press that subscribe button because this tale will touch you deeply. The snow descended like silence taking form, a dense white veil draping over the mountains of Aspen, Colorado. It wasn't a soft snowfall. This was the type that stung the flesh and engulfed entire landscapes, erasing pathways, trees, fences, everything except cold and wind. The storm had come early, sweeping through the town's outskirts like a specter, fierce and unbidden. Sarah Bennett gripped the steering wheel tightly as she navigated slowly along the winding forest path. Her Subaru protested, tires clinging to packed ice as pine trees sagged under snow's weight. She leaned forward, peering through the windshield wiper's steady beat, jaw clenched. The rear of her vehicle was packed with supplies, insulin, antibiotics, wound dressings, all for the mountain outpost clinic that seldom saw visitors, especially in such weather. Sarah was 42, tall and slim, with a face molded by quiet resilience. Her cheekbones were prominent and slightly gaunt from years of weariness. She had olive-hued skin that rarely saw sunlight and long, dark brown hair neatly tucked into a thick woolen cap. Her attire, plain jeans, a gray jacket, and waterproof boots offered little protection from the memories gnawing at her mind's edges. She had been solitary since Michael passed 3 winters ago, sudden heart failure in the driveway. Since then, she kept herself occupied and distant from anything tender. This was meant to be a swift delivery. Drop off the meds at the clinic before the pass closed and return before nightfall. But now, with snow covering every trail and tree, she wondered if she had misjudged. Then she heard it. Initially, it sounded like a creaking tree trunk. But as the car inched forward, it came again faint and high, almost human. A cry, a whimper. Sarah frowned. She halted the car and silenced the engine. Instantly, the silence outside flooded in. Then it sounded again, a faint, nearly desperate noise lost in the wind. She grabbed her flashlight and stepped into the storm. Wind tore at her coat, hurling ice at her cheeks. She pressed forward, stepping off the path into the trees, boots sinking into snow past her ankles. The whimper grew louder as she followed a narrow, half-frozen path under a grove of pines. Then her light caught movement, a shape. 2. There, beneath an ancient tree with bark as solid as stone, were 2 tiny bundles of fur. Sarah's breath hitched. They were dogs, no puppies. Golden retrievers, only weeks old, tied tightly to the tree with heavy rope, one slumped over the other. Their bodies pressed so close to the trunk, it seemed they were trying to vanish into it. Snow had collected on their backs, and the rope cut into their fur, forming raw red lines across their bellies and legs. Their small bodies quivered, not from movement, but from the struggle to survive. Sarah knelt down. The first puppy had a creamy gold coat, almost pale against the snow, with one ear drooping slightly to the side. The other was darker, more amber-hued, with a thin white streak between his eyes. Both were thin, malnourished, their ribs visible through matted fur. Their eyes, glassy and half-closed, blinked slowly, as if staying awake was too taxing. Above them, a crumpled piece of notebook paper was taped to the tree with clear packing tape. It flapped fiercely in the wind. Sarah pulled it off. Scrawled in thick black marker were 5 words. "We regret this. Please show kindness." Her stomach churned. "No," she whispered, looking at the pups again. "No, no, no." She removed her gloves and reached for the knots. The rope was thick, like that used for camping or boats, and pulled cruelly tight. Her fingers, already stiff from cold, worked slowly. Whoever tied it ensured they couldn't move, wrapping it around their necks, bellies, and legs to prevent escape. "Hold on," she whispered. "I've got you." The wind intensified, whipping her scarf around her face. She crouched lower, shielding the puppies with her body as she wrestled with the rope. One knot loosened, then another. The cream-colored puppy whimpered softly when she freed his hind legs. The darker one remained still, his head sagging against the tree, but his eyes stayed fixed on hers. She had no knife, no scissors, just fingers and rage. Her nails split, skin scraped raw, but she persisted. After what felt like forever, the last loop fell free. The rope dropped into the snow like shed skin. Sarah pulled both puppies into her jacket, wrapping them against her chest. Their bodies were so cold, she feared they'd stop breathing in her arms. She tucked their heads under her scarf, shielding them from the wind. She stood, legs trembling. The storm hadn't eased. It had worsened. Visibility was barely a few feet, but she didn't hesitate. She turned and trudged back, the weight of 2 lives pressed against her heart. Back at the car, she turned the heater to maximum and placed the puppies on the passenger seat, layering towels from her emergency kit beneath them. Their bodies curled together instinctively, breathing shallow but present. Sarah sat behind the wheel, staring at them. Her hands shook, not from cold, but from something deeper, something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. She reached out and stroked the lighter one's head. "You too weren't meant to be abandoned," she whispered. "Not like this." She paused, then looked at the road ahead. She hadn't owned a pet since childhood. She hadn't let anything into her life that could be lost again. But seeing these 2 trembling creatures, so small, so helpless, so unwanted, something broke free in her chest. She reached for the gear shift, voice steady now. "Let's go home." Sarah's cabin nestled against the slope of Cedar Lake's northern ridge, its stone chimney trailing a wisp of smoke into the icy morning sky. The storm had raged through the night, blanketing her roof with thick white snow, burying her porch in soft drifts and transforming the woods around her home into a frozen sanctuary. But inside, warmth returned, not just from the fire crackling in the hearth, but from the soft, rhythmic breathing of 2 tiny creatures curled in a bundle of towels. They hadn't moved much during the drive home. Sarah had driven cautiously, never letting her eyes stray far from the passenger seat where the puppies lay. Their golden coats were still stiff with frost and crusted ice, their tiny bodies barely stirring except for occasional shivers. She had spoken to them softly during the ride, not from habit, but because silence felt heavier when unshared. Once inside, she placed them gently on a large folded blanket near the fireplace. The room was dim, lit only by the flames and a soft orange glow from a small lamp beside her reading chair. She turned up the thermostat and hurried to the kitchen, grabbing a heating pad, a bowl of warm water, an emergency pet formula she hadn't used since volunteering at an animal shelter a decade ago. She returned to the fireplace and knelt beside them, her knees creaking slightly. One puppy stirred, the lighter one with the drooping left ear. He let out a faint whimper but didn't lift his head. The darker one remained still. Sarah placed the heating pad under the blanket and covered them with another layer of towels. Then she dipped a clean cloth into the warm water and began wiping away the frozen grime from their fur. Only then did she see the marks around their bellies and necks, faint red grooves where the rope had been. Small, raw abrasions ran beneath their legs where the tight bindings had chafed. Sarah's throat tightened. She wasn't one to cry easily, but something about those wounds, their quiet pain, made her eyes sting. "I'm sorry," she whispered, unsure to whom. She warmed a small feeding syringe with diluted formula and held it to the darker puppy's mouth. His eyes fluttered open slightly, and he licked the tip once, twice, then with more urgency. Encouraged, Sarah fed him slowly, then offered the same to the other. He was more alert, his tongue flicking out eagerly, though he remained still otherwise. "You're a fighter," she murmured to the lighter pup. "And you?" She looked at the darker one. "You're holding on." "That's enough." When they were fed and clean, she sat back on her heels and gazed at them for a long time. It had been years since anyone relied on her for more than medicine or signatures. Years since she'd looked at anything and felt it anchor to her heart so quietly, so completely. "I suppose I can't keep calling you Puppy and Puppy," she said aloud. "That wouldn't be fair." She studied them again. The lighter one had a spark in his eyes now, subtle but clear, mischievous perhaps, or just eager for life. The darker one seemed older, despite being the same size, more cautious, more introspective. "You're Finn," she decided, brushing her finger under the chin of the lighter pup with the floppy ear. "And you," she turned to the other, "you're Rex." They didn't respond, but the name settled into the room like a sigh. As firelight danced against the wood-paneled walls, Sarah leaned back against the couch. The storm outside had softened to a gentle hum, snow falling in fat, lazy flakes past the windows. Rex twitched faintly, his legs moving as if chasing something in a dream. Moments later, his small body tensed, and he let out a tiny, frightened yelp. Sarah sat forward quickly, her hand instinctively covering his back. He shook briefly, then whimpered again, eyes still closed, breathing rapid. "It's okay," she murmured, stroking him gently. "You're safe now." "She, little one, she." He calmed after a while, his tiny frame curling closer to Finn's, but Sarah kept her hand there, not for a long time. The fire crackled beside them, and for the first time in years, Sarah didn't feel like a nurse, a widow, or someone merely passing through her own life. She felt like a guardian, a presence, someone whose hands were finally needed for something that wanted them. Later that night, as the clock struck midnight and the house lay still, she stood to make tea. Later that night, as the clock struck midnight, and the house lay still, she stood to make tea. Later that night, Her back ached, her limbs heavy with the day's weight, but she paused in the living room doorway to glance back. Finn had draped a paw over Rex's back. Rex, still twitching slightly in sleep, had tucked his head beneath Finn's neck. Their breathing was shallow but steady. She walked to the kitchen, but never made the tea. Morning arrived with the soft creak of old wood warming and the scent of fresh snow melting on the windowsills. The storm had passed, leaving a whitewashed world outside and a strange calm within. Sarah stirred from a light sleep, the kind that never fully rested. She'd spent most of the night on the living room floor, her legs curled around two small golden bodies that had finally stopped trembling. Rex opened his eyes first. The darker of the two, he stretched cautiously, then nestled closer to her side. Finn followed, his cream-colored fur catching the morning light like spun gold. His floppy ear twitched as he blinked up at her with a tiny, curious whine. Sarah smiled faintly, brushing her fingers through their soft fur. "Good morning, you little troublemakers," she murmured. Her voice was rough from sleep, but lighter in tone. She couldn't recall the last time she'd spoken aloud upon waking. She eased upright and shuffled to the kitchen, warming formula and pouring herself a half cup of black coffee. The cabin was quiet, but not in the hollow way it had been for years. Now the silence felt shared. Returning to the living room, Sarah knelt and offered the small bottles. Finn lapped eagerly. Rex, more cautious, sniffed before drinking slowly. When done, she wiped their faces with a clean rag, and neither resisted. Rex even leaned slightly into her hand. She began training them simply, starting with voice recognition. "Finn," she'd say softly, tapping her knee. "Come here, Finn." The pup would tilt his head and eventually trot over on unsteady legs, his tail giving a slight wag. "Rex," she'd whisper next, holding out a finger. Rex would gaze at her with solemn brown eyes, pause, then shuffle forward. He never wagged, not yet, but he came. That was enough. That first week was a series of small triumphs. Sarah laid towels in every room and blocked the stairs. She moved the rug near the fireplace where the boys liked to nap and set up a feeding area by the kitchen. At night, they slept curled at her bed's foot Finn, often with a paw over Rex, like a protective older brother in a smaller body. Each night, Rex still twitched in sleep, legs moving as if fleeing something unseen. But the cries softened, from sharp yelps to faint whimpers. Sarah kept a hand on his back when it happened, grounding him. Finn, meanwhile, wagged his tail whenever Sarah stirred a spoon in her tea or tapped a glass's rim. It was his cue that food might follow. One evening, as Sarah sat by the window watching snowflakes dance under the porch light, a knock came at the door. She wasn't expecting anyone. Visitors were rare this far into the hills. She opened the door to an elderly woman, wrapped in a heavy burgundy coat with a faux fur collar brushing her shoulders. Her silver hair was tied in a neat bun, her pale blue eyes sparkling beneath thick round glasses. "Sarah Bennett?" the woman asked, her voice warm and slightly raspy, like pages turning in an old book. "Yes, that's me," Sarah replied, stepping aside. "Please come in. It's freezing out." "I won't stay long," the woman said, stepping carefully inside and brushing snow from her sleeves. "Name's Clara, from 2 cabins down. Saw your lights on these past nights. Thought I'd check if everything was okay." Sarah nodded slowly. "I've been up more than usual, I suppose." Clara's gaze drifted to the 2 puppies sleeping by the fire. "Well, now that explains it." She moved closer, crouching slowly, her knees creaking audibly. Golden retrievers, aren't they? Yes, I found them in the storm. Sarah hesitated. Tied to a tree. Clara didn't look shocked, only sorrowful. She reached out with a wrinkled hand, hovering over Rex's head before gently petting him. He stirred slightly, then settled. I've lived here 30 years, Clara said quietly. Seen much good, and many folks discard what they think they don't need. But sometimes, she paused, smiling knowingly at Sarah, sometimes what's discarded ends up in the perfect hands. Sarah sat on the hearthstone beside her. I haven't had company in a while, Clara chuckled. Well, these two might change that. For a moment, neither spoke, just the fire between them and the pup's soft breathing. Then Clara added, almost to herself, maybe they didn't come for you to save them. Maybe they came to save you. The words settled like dust in lamplight. Sarah looked at the little creatures nestled together and thought how empty the house had felt a week ago, and how now even the shadows seemed softer. After Clara left, promising to bring puppy kibble from her late dog, Sarah stood in the quiet, staring at the fire. She thought of Michael for the first time in months, not the sharp pain of his absence, but his laughter when they talked of adopting a dog someday. Now someday had arrived in a storm, in the tiniest forms, bringing light back into the house. The road to Aspen was slick with slush, the kind that left gray streaks on the windshield and made every turn a negotiation. Sarah gripped the wheel with both hands, knuckles pale under soft leather gloves. The puppies were in the back seat, nestled in a large carrier padded with fleece blankets. Finn lay curled tightly, his floppy ear pressed against Rex's side. Rex, wide-eyed and silent, watched everything with an intensity that made him seem older than his weeks. Sarah glanced at them in the rearview mirror, heart tight. It had been nearly 2 weeks since she found them. Though stronger now, eating well, growing, shadows lingered in their eyes. Today, she was taking them for their first vet visit. Part of her sought answers. The rest just wanted confirmation they were okay. The clinic was a small, converted cottage just past Main Street, painted pale green with white shutters and a crooked sign reading Cedar Lake Veterinary. It smelled faintly of lavender and antiseptic. Inside, a young woman behind the counter looked up from her computer. She had a kind face, freckled cheeks, and short, springy auburn curls tied with a yellow pencil. "Hi, Sarah Bennett," she asked, voice cheerful. "Yes," Sarah replied. "I called about the 2 rescue pups." "Of course, I'm Lila. Dr. Harper will see you soon." She gestured to a bench by the window. Sarah sat, cradling the puppies. The room was warm, softly lit. Potted plants sat on the windowsill beside a bowl of dog treats. Finn sniffed the air cautiously. Rex stayed tucked in still. Soon, the exam room door opened and a man stepped out. Mid-50s, with a square jaw, silver-streaked black hair, and a trimmed beard. His dark eyes were serious, softened by crow's feet suggesting past smiles. He wore a slate-gray fleece vest over scrubs and walked with a slight limp. "Miss Bennett?" he asked, voice calm. "I'm Dr. Harper. Let's see your boys." Sarah followed him to a room with a tall metal table under a warm light. She placed the puppies on a soft towel atop it. Dr. Harper observed silently, letting the dogs sniff his hands before touching them. "About 5 weeks," he murmured, running fingers along Rex's spine. "No microchips. teeth underdeveloped. Late bloomers, common in overbred litters. Overbred? Sarah asked, voice sharpening. Dr. Harper looked up. Likely from a backyard breeder, maybe a puppy mill. These operations churn out dozens of litters, often in filthy conditions. Little socialization, no vet care. Sarah's jaw tightened. Someone tied them to a tree in a blizzard. He sighed. Not the first time. Puppies like these, if deemed weak or unprofitable, are often abandoned, especially where enforcement's lax. He checked their paws, ears, bellies. Finn flinched at the stethoscope on his ribs. Rex stared at a corner, unmoving. Underweight, but responsive. No internal issues. Scars healing well. He paused, meeting Sarah's eyes. But these boys have trauma. Physical stuff's easy. The rest takes time. She nodded, mouth dry. They flinch at loud noises, she murmured. And panic when it rains. Dr. Harper straightened. Not uncommon. Puppies remember more than people think. He printed intake forms from a cabinet. Keep them close during storms. Routine helps familiar smells, gentle hands. That's how trust grows. Sarah lifted the pups, one in each arm. Finn licked her chin once. Rex buried his face in her coat. As they left, Lila handed her puppy vitamins and wound salve. Let us know how they're doing, she smiled. They've got survivor eyes, tough little guys. On the drive home, clouds gathered over the hills. By the time they reached the cabin, raindrops fell cold, sharp taps on the windshield. The sky darkened quickly. Thunder rolled like distant drums. Finn reacted first. As the car door opened and wind and rain crept in, he shook. Inside, he wriggled free and dove under the wooden bench by the coat rack. Rex followed, skittering across the hardwood to the kitchen cabinet's corner, curling tight and letting out a low, drawn-out whine. Sarah stood in the doorway, soaked and breathless. Her heart broke again. She dropped to the floor, not bothering to change or remove her boots. Lying flat on the hardwood, she stretched an arm under the bench toward Finn. It's okay, she whispered. You're safe. Just rain, just a storm. I'm here. She stayed until he crept out, paws slipping. She gathered him to her chest with one hand, the other reaching for Rex. It took longer, but he came silently. When he did, he lay beside her like gravity had shifted. Sarah pulled a blanket from the couch, draping it over all three. Rain battered the windows. Thunder boomed, but in the blanket's cocoon, their breaths sensed. No one's leaving, she whispered, pressing her forehead to theirs. Not again. This is home now. The snow had mostly melted, leaving a patchwork of slush and bare earth. The hills around Sarah's cabin looked softer, less like a frozen waste, more like something stirring. It was a Tuesday morning, quiet and still, and Sarah was wiping the kitchen counter when the phone rang. She didn't know the number. Her fingers hesitated before answering. Hello, is this Sarah Bennett? The voice was professional yet gentle, female, likely mid-30s. Yes, speaking. This is Lavra Hensley, Aspen County Animal Welfare. I'm calling about 2 golden retriever puppies, Finn and Rex, I believe. Sarah's breath caught, her grip tightening on the cloth. Yes, they're with me. Is something wrong? A report came through a missing pets forum, Laura said. A family thinks they recognize the dogs from an online photo. They claim their puppies were stolen 3 weeks ago. The kitchen felt colder. Sarah leaned against the counter, heart pounding. Are you saying they might not be strays? No assumptions yet, Lavra said calmly. It could be a misunderstanding, but we must investigate. Can we schedule a visit for photos and details? Sarah swallowed hard. Of course. Thank you. Officer Dalton will come tomorrow at 10 o'clock. Sarah hung up, staring at the floor like it might crack open. In the living room, Finn and Rex chased each other in slow, clumsy circles, Finn stumbling as Rex nipped his tail. They were playing Happy Here, hers. She sat on the floor, arms open. Both puppies ran to her, tails wagging, climbing into her lap like they belonged nowhere else. Sarah buried her face in Rex's neck. "What if someone takes you?" she whispered. Sleep came in fragments that night. She lay awake long after the dogs curled on her quilt. Every creak, every gust outside stirred an unfamiliar fear. She'd lost people, her parents, Michael, but this was different. This was something she'd chosen to love. Next morning, she dressed early, pulling on a clean sweater and brushing her hair for the first time in days. She made tea she didn't drink. At 10 o'clock sharp, a knock came. She opened the door to a tall, clean-cut man in his late 40s, pale skin, sandy blonde hair neatly combed, and a sharp jaw showing years of discipline. He wore a navy blue field jacket with the county insignia and carried a black leather satchel. "Miss Bennett?" he asked politely. "Yes, come in. I'm Officer Dalton." "I'll be quick, just verifying." He stepped inside, scanning the room professionally. His eyes landed on the puppies curled by the fireplace. "They've gained weight," he noted. "I feed them every 4 hours. They're sleeping through the night now." Dalton knelt, pulling a notepad and pen from his satchel. He watched Finn and Rex, then showed 2 printed photos. "These are the reported missing dogs. May I compare markings?" Sarah stepped closer, heart fluttering. The photos showed golden retriever puppies, same age, same build, but different ears, darker coat, wider set eyes. Dalton studied them for a minute. "Not the same," he said, looking up. "Colors close, but markings don't match." "I'll file it as a false match." Sarah's chest ached. She hadn't realized she was holding her breath. She pressed a hand to her mouth, tears welling. "Thank you," she said, voice breaking. "I didn't steal them. I found them tied to a tree." "I believe you," he softened. "People panic when pets go missing. Sometimes they want to believe they've found them." He stood, tucking photos away. "File for legal custody, just to be safe." After he left, Sarah sat on the couch, letting quiet tears of relief, of fear released, of love named, fall. Finn climbed into her lap, pawing her chest. Rex rested his head by her knee, sighing long. That afternoon, Sarah drove to town. The Aspen County Animal Shelter was a low brick building near a park, painted beige with a mural of dogs and cats. The clerk, a young woman with a high ponytail and a badge reading Sophia, greeted her. "I'd like to apply for adoption," Sarah said. "For 2 golden retriever pups," Sophia smiled. "Finn and Rex, right?" "We've heard about them. Here's the paperwork." She handed over a clipboard and pens. Sarah filled out each line carefully. Employment, home environment, pet experience. "Why do you want to adopt?" She paused, then wrote, "Because they chose me and I chose them back."
"Forms submitted." Sophia handed her 2 folders. "We'll contact you for the home visit and vet check. You're doing the right thing." Sarah walked into the cooler, a strange lightness in her chest. It was realizing she already was. Winter lingered like an uninvited guest, though the sun rose earlier and snow no longer fell heavily. Aspen's ridgeline stayed frosty. Icicles clung to eaves. The lake below Sarah's cabin frozen in rippled stillness. But birds returned chickadees. Red-winged blackbirds flitting among pine sand. The wind, once bitter, felt merely cool. Sarah stood by the window, hands around a chipped ceramic mug. Outside, Finn and Rex tumbled in the half-thawed yard, chasing each other in uneven circles. Their legs were sturdier, coats thicker. Finn's floppy ear had begun to straighten, though not fully. Rex, ever thoughtful, moved hesitantly, but his tail wagged more not wildly, just enough to say, "I'm okay." They were hers, officially. The paperwork was approved the previous week. Sophia had called, laughing. "Congratulations, Mom of two. Your house is full." Sarah had cried quietly in her parked car outside the grocery store. Passers-by, unaware how one line of ink could anchor a heart. That morning, she pulled on boots, zipped her faded green parka, and packed a canvas satchel with leashes, a thermos of tea, and a wooden plaque she'd carved over 2 evenings. The pine was smooth, letters burnt carefully. They were once abandoned. Now they are loved forever. She let the screen door creak, and both dogs rushed to her. Rex sat as she clipped his leash. Finn yipped, dancing until his was secure. "Let's go back," Sarah said softly. Just once. The trail had softened since that night. Snow was patchy, revealing pine needles and damp soil. Streams trickled. The lake's hum, hinting it would soon thaw. They followed the path she'd taken. One she hadn't revisited. She'd nearly forgotten the forest, unfrozen, scent-deep, earthy, like rain, embarked. The climb wasn't steep, but her breath quickened. The dogs stayed close, sensing the moment's weight. The old pine stood, as she remembered, tall, gnarled, bark like cracked leather, roots thick in the ground. Snow dusted its base, the clearing hushed, holding something sacred. Sarah paused, staring at the tree. Her hands trembled as she knelt and placed the plaque at its base, pushing it into softened snow. Rex sniffed the wood, letting out a low woof, not alarmed, but questioning. Finn pressed his head against her leg, nose nudging her coat as he once did when scared. Today he wasn't. Sarah sat on a mossy root, exhaling slowly. She recalled her bleeding fingers clawing at the rope, her thundering heart when they didn't move. How she'd whispered, "Please stay," to 2 tiny beings, taught the world didn't care. She watched the dogs sniff and settle beside her, like bookends of one story. No fear now, just peace. A rustle drew her attention. A man approached, mid-60s wiry, with a snow-white beard, heavy wool coat, and a walking stick of twisted oak. His tanned, sharp face had deep-set gray eyes and a mouth creased by silence. "Afternoon," he said, pausing nearby. "Hello," Sarah replied. "Guarded, but not cold." He nodded at the plaque. "Yours." She nodded. "They were found here in the storm." He sat on a boulder. "Name's Walter. Live off the western slope. Hike here sometimes. Saw tracks that day. Didn't follow. Sure to have." Sarah looked at him, unsure. Walter continued, voice low. "Lost my dog last year. 15 years. Still look for 'em in corners. Not used to silence. Sarah's eyes softened. I wasn't used to noise, he chuckled. Seems we've swapped places. They sat quietly, wind shifting through branches. Walter stood, tapped his stick. You did good. I don't know, Sarah said. Sometimes I think they saved me first. He nodded, as if that made perfect sense. When he left, Sarah stood, brushing snow from her knees. She looked at the black dog's tree. Let's go home, she whispered. As they walked back, the sky parted slightly. Sunlight streamed through clouds, golden and warm, casting long shadows. Finn trotted ahead, ears bouncing. Rex stayed close, glancing up, checking she was there. She was! Always would be. Spring settled softly over Aspen, not with fanfare, but quiet persistence. The wind no longer bit, it danced. The lake by Sarah's cabin thawed into a rippling mirror. Wildflowers, shyly pushing through soil like whispers, turn into words. Pines stood greener, free of snow's burden. Life crept back, slow and steady, like breath after a long cry. Inside, the cabin smelled of lemon oil and wood smoke. Dust motes floated in golden light as Sarah knelt by an old cedar chest under the stairs. She hadn't opened it since the week after Michael's funeral, when she'd tucked away another life's remnants. She hesitated, hand on the lid. Finn and Rex lay curled on the rug, noses twitching in sleep. The chest creaked open. Inside were envelopes, some yellowed, others crisp photo albums with worn leather toys. Her mother's faded apron. Beneath a daisy-patterned quilt, she found what she had done. Dee sought, but knew she defined. A photo in a notebook, pages. Sarah's breath caught as she freed it. A 10-year-old self grinned through missing teeth, hugging a chubby golden retriever puppy with a crooked tongue. The dog was Duchess, her best friend through lonely summer. Duchess passed when Sarah was 12, her grief so fierce her parents avoided new pets. Sarah stared at the photo, fingers trembling. Its edges were worn, but its joy endured. Her lips curved in a slow smile. A sound made her look up. Finn padded toward her, tail swaying, eyes soft with curiosity. He sniffed the photo, then, breathtakingly, took it gently in his teeth, carried it across the room, and set it on the couch. With ancient solemnity, he jumped up, curled where Sarah often read, and looked at her. Rex stirred, padding over, stretching, and lay by her knee, eyes heavy, as if he dreamed this moment and arrived on time.
Sarah's throat tightened. She crossed the room, picked up the photo, and sat beside Finn. He pressed against her thigh. Rex curled at her feet. She traced Duchess's ears in the photo and whispered, "I think you sent them, didn't you?" A breeze through the open window carried damp earth and lilacs, stirring the curtains and tugging the photo's edge like a nod. That afternoon, the cabin filled with quiet peace. Sarah poured tea, sat by the window, and watched Finn and Rex doze in sunlight near the porch. Their chests rose and fell together, small huffs escaping. Finn snored, a soft whistle. Rex twitched, chasing something joyful in a dream. No more barking at every creak, no startled whimpers at distant thunder. Fear hadn't vanished, but had softened into memory. Sarah left lights on at night for them. One night she forgot, and no one cried. She spoke more not just to the dogs, but herself. Clara, who visited weekly with muffins and stories of her late husband's birdwatching Sophia, who helped start a donation drive for abandoned litters. Even Walter, the quiet man carving oak dog toys for Finn and Rex, left wordlessly on her porch. She was no longer invisible in her life. As evening neared, Sarah knelt by the cedar chest, hand on the wood, whispering thanks to the past, to Duchess, to whatever led her into that storm. Back in the living room, Finn and Rex sprawled on the couch. She laughed softly, squeezing between them. Rex rested his head on her lap. Finn placed a paw on her chest, claiming her heart again. Sarah leaned back, eyes closed. The fireplace crackled. The air smelled of home, the silence once heavy with grief now alive with life. "I think you were sent to me," she whispered. "Not to be saved, but to save me." Their steady breathing answered. Sometimes miracles arrive quietly in two trembling puppies tied to a tree, or a woman's gentle hand who thought love was done but wasn't. Finn and Rex weren't just rescued. They were sent by grace, chance, or perhaps God. And maybe this story reached you for a reason to remind you healing is real. Second chances happen. You're never too lost to be found. If this touched your heart, share it. Someone might need it today. Comment below, share where you're viewing from or your own story. If you believe every soul, animal or human, deserves love and protection, subscribe and join our little family. May God bless you, and may He watch over every lost creature, every kind hand, every quiet miracle waiting to be found.